What is up, YouTube? Brandon here from the Scale Racing channel, bringing one out of my collection to show you. This is the Race Prep Pro Radiant. This particular car started out for me as a standard AYK Radiant. I picked it up probably 13 years ago on eBay, and my intent was to pick this car up and gradually build it into a Pro Radiant. The Pro Radiants were so hard to find, and usually when you did find them, they were either just beat to death or some astronomical price. So I picked this up for a decent price, newly built, never been run. It was in pretty good shape. I mean, it was never run. It was just basically stored away. The box is in pretty poor condition, but the car that was in it was very good. And we'll just take a look here. Some of the features on the car: it was a rear motor, had gold aluminum side plate chassis, no slipper clutch, did come with a mechanical speed control originally, oil-filled aluminum shocks, did come with ball differentials front and rear. Take a look at the other side of this box if there's anything on here. Yeah, we'll take a look at that. And pause it if you want to read this. That's pretty much what the original car looked like when I received it. Did not come with an AYK motor. I think it had some kind of a silver can, Mabuchi or something like that. But anyway, that is what this car started out as and brought forth the transformation into the Pro Radiant. And here's what we have today. I'll go over the history of the car just a little bit. The Radiant, I believe, was first released in '86 or '87. I didn't see many ads for it in the RC Car Action magazine. In fact, you really didn't see a whole lot of anything from AYK. And they teamed up with the Dunn brothers at Race Prep and started their distribution over in California, and a lot of the AYK based motors started making their way out in the United States, both stock and modified. You can pretty much tell them apart from almost anything else with the orange plastic end bell. But Pro Radiant was basically the same car as the Boost. The Boost was an upgraded version of the original Radiant, and that's when they went to the mid-motor design. And they did that primarily, you know, to compete with the YZ10s and the Schumacher Cats and the Kyosho Optimas of the day. And yeah, they upgraded quite a few parts on the machine, not to mention putting the motor in the mid-motor configuration, but they upgraded the shocks from the originals to what we have on this one here. They went to 2.0 inch wheels and tires. Other than that, the drivetrain was, minus the fact that it was a mid-motor, was pretty much the same, chain-driven. And this was back when everybody was going to belt. I mean, Kyosho, Schumacher, Yokomo, they were all going to belt, but Race Prep stuck with the chain drive. Anyway, June 1989, this magazine right here, RC Car Action, has the first article on the Pro Radiant, and they had some pretty nice things to say about it. And I didn't see the Pro Radiant ad in RC Car Action magazine until the next month, July of 1989. And I think any of us who have ever looked through some of the older RC Car Action magazines definitely remember this ad. And that right there was enough to do it for me. Anyway, back in the day, I was racing two-wheel drive buggy mostly. Didn't have the money for a four-wheel drive. You know, back then, if you're going to run a modified motor in a four-wheel drive buggy, you're going to have to spend some money on batteries. The Sanyo SCE 7-cell battery packs were pretty much the required norm for four-wheel drive modified racing. And back then, those battery packs were going for about $70 plus a piece. And since you could only really run those once a race night, you pretty much had to have 4 battery packs. So do the math, it got really expensive. And being a kid back then, I just didn't have the money for that. But fast forward to today, a little bit of extra money to spend. I can go back and reminisce and buy some of the cars that I was drooling over in the magazines. And this was definitely one of those cars. Like I said, this one did start out as a AYK Radiant, and got in contact with Bob Stormer Hobbies. Back when I first started this build, he had a lot of race prep parts still hanging on the shelf in his own personal stash, and I managed to do some horse trading with Bob, and he hooked me up with the brand new wheels and tires. Those were different than what came on the original Radiant, and he also set me up with the one-ways in the front and the conversion kit. And the conversion kit basically took your rear motor Radiant to a mid-motor Pro Radiant design. The kit Pro Radiants came with a black FRP chassis. The conversion kit came with just the natural G10. It was not all inclusive either. There were some parts I had to source, quite a few parts I had to source beyond just the chassis conversion to make this complete. It did come with the side rails and the battery plate. It came with the battery plate mounting bracket. It came with the lay shaft and everything you needed to convert it over to the mid-motor. Came with the rear shock tower. And I'm thinking that was about it. I had to find the shocks and the arms. The arms on the original were black. These are fiber reinforced in an orange color. And the UK seller is who I source these parts from. These shocks are actually, pretty nice shocks. Not personally run any of these cars on the track, but the cars that I saw running on the track with these shocks seem to handle pretty well. Anyway, let's see what else. What did I have to source? I had to source the battery clamps. That wasn't included in the kit. I also had to source the steering bell crank bracket. That was not in the kit. And I had to source the bell crank pivots. And those were pretty hard to find. Everything else was relatively easy. Also the rear gold anodized guard. That was a hard one to find. That did not come with the conversion kit. As you can see here, ladder construction, it does have a, I think this is just a plastic cover that goes over the bottom of it to make sure all the junk and stuff stays out of your drivetrain. The original Radiant did come with a front bumper. The Pro Radiants did not. Let's see what else here. Like I said, I had to source the shocks and the arms and the knuckles were all part of the A-arm deal. So everything on here is pretty close to the Pro Radiant buggy, and I'll go over some of the features on the car. Okay, starting in the front, we're looking at a dual A-arm front suspension, completely non-adjustable. You can't adjust any camber or anything like that. What you get is what you got. Originally came with just regular non-turnbuckle ends. Of course, that can be upgraded later on if you wanted to. Inside this plastic housing in here was the front sprocket and ball diff, and it does have ball diffs front and rear. As I said before, chain drive, aluminum oil-filled shocks, all the way around on all four corners used the dog bone style drive. They did not use universals. At least I'm sure they were probably an upgrade at the time that you could buy, but did not come with universals. Non-slipper type spur gear with 32 pitch gears. There was an option where you could get a 42 pitch conversion to where you could run a finer pitch gear on your main drive. There's a look at the center section. Basically, you have spur gear, the shaft going through the chassis connected to a small sprocket, and that small sprocket drives this rear diff drum, and that rear diff drum also directs the power up to the front. All chain drive. Actually, it's a pretty efficient system. The chains didn't have memory like the belts did, so there was a little less friction involved, but you know, there's obviously a lot of wear points on that chain, but for the most part, a very efficient drivetrain, not a whole lot of monkey business going on in there. In the bottom, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's got like a little molded plastic piece where the chain is basically just laying in this little tray to make sure it stays straight. It doesn't rub on the chassis or anything like that. Let's see, what else do we have going on here? In the back, you do have the option for camber adjustments and also the rear shock tower. You can actually play around with your roll center a little bit. Multiple options for shock mounting. It's got the wing buttons in the rear. The original car did not have a detachable wing. It was actually part of the body, I guess you could say, molded into the body. And on this particular car, I mean, why wouldn't you put Novak gear in here, right? I mean, this car is orange. The motor is a race prep modified motor with the orange end bell. So why would you not put Novak gear in here? So I've got a Novak NES-1A servo taking my steering duties. NER2X Novak receiver with a Novak T1 speed controller. I think all the orange on this buggy with some of the black plastics and whatnot really looks nice. This is a race prep battery, original race prep battery. You probably can't see it in there, but it does have the white shrink wrap with the race prep label on the battery. So it's pretty much complete as far as I'm concerned. Still needs paint on the body, but you know, this is a bittersweet video for me. Sweet because, you know, this buggy, I love this buggy. I've had it for a long time. I've taken as good a care as I could with it, making this into the Pro Radiant, giving myself a car that I could never afford when I was a kid, that I was always watching on the track whenever they were out there racing. Yeah, it's sweet for me because of that, but it's a little, the bitter part is as soon as I'm done with this video, this guy is getting packed up in a box and heading to its new owner, going down to Australia. A friend of mine that I've known for ages hit me up the other day, asked me if I had anything interesting for sale. I said, well, what are you looking for, man? He said, AYK or Yokomo? I said, I've got an AYK you might be interested in. And sure enough, he was interested. So put the finishing touches on it. I did not connect this motor wire to the motor. Figured I would let him do that if he wanted to. This motor is brand spanking new. It's never been soldered to. I was going to let him decide on whether or not he really wants to solder to that beautiful motor. If he does, great. If he doesn't, great. Oh, outfitted it with race prep motor plugs. I'm sure anybody who's raced back in the day probably recognizes those. This is the kind that does have the polarity tab on the side. The early ones did not. Everybody swapped over to the race prep plugs because they were much better than the Tamiya plugs. Tamiya plugs could only hold so much current before they started melting down. And then race prep came out, these guys, and Yeah, there was no polarity tab on it. They had like a little indicator here on the top, this little indicator looking thing, I guess you could say, to get the polarity right. But everybody knows back then, if you hook the battery up with the reverse polarity, it pretty much blows your brakes instantly. So yes, I did learn my lesson one time on that. I didn't have to ever do it again, but yeah, this one does have the newer style race prep plug on it. Let's see, anything else? Can't think of anything else as far as features on this car goes. Oh, it does come with, originally the Radiant came with ball bearings on the inside drive and the transmission, plastic bushings on the outer wheels. And this one I did convert over to full ball bearings all the way through the car, so there's no bushings on this car. And just got a few more other things I'd like to talk about with this car. As I fondle it for the last time, I'll kind of shoot the breeze with you about the history of it a little bit more. Like I said, it was first out in 1989. It was labeled the Boost. I believe that was probably only sold in Japan and Europe. And when AYK came out with the Boost, they also got with the Dunn brothers and renamed it the Pro Radiant and put the race prep badging on it to kind of help get it out in the mainstream and get the U.S. sales up a little bit. Put the car to the control of the Dunn brothers, and they were really successful with this car. And you're still talking about driving against some other cars with a little bit newer technology on them, and they were still holding their own back then. They are, in my opinion, considerably lighter than the Optimas back then. Even the Optima Mids and the Mid SEs, considerably lighter car than even the YZ10. So, I mean, it did have that advantage going for it. This car was also, they had a conversion kit for this car, which actually put a flat chassis plate along the bottom of it. And that allowed the racers to use a 7-cell SATA pack, which, you know, helped with extending runtime and rigidity of the car. But it's got a little bit of flex to it, but I'm sure that probably helped on some of those outdoor tracks back in the day. I remember seeing these cars on the track, and man, they ripped. They were awesome. They sounded cool. They looked good. Of course, the tracks back then weren't the motocross style tracks that we're used to seeing nowadays, with the ginormous jumps and everything, you know, running on packed clay tracks. You know, this car was performing on lightly groomed topsoil tracks, really loamy, you know, hence the knobbies. Obviously, a lot of racers would trim those down if the track started getting a little bit harder to get better traction. But yeah, the loamy topsoil tracks with this 4-wheel drive setup, these cars really ripped around the track. Let's see what else. The body for this, I got a little story about the body. The body was one of the hardest things I had to find for this car. And what I did was I actually sourced a used body. It was actually in excellent condition. Somebody had painted maybe one light coat of Pactra paint on it, and I toyed around with the idea of using the brake cleaner, or not the brake cleaner, but brake fluid to remove the paint off of the body. But, you know, it was Pactra paint. It was hard to get off. So I contacted Team Blue Groove. Said, hey, I've got one body that you'll probably never find. It is cut out. It was cut out below the cut lines, and it was in perfect condition other than the fact that it had been cut out and there was spray paint on it. But took the body, made a mold out of it, and I got the first run of bodies that he did produce for the Pro Radiant. I believe he's still got those available now. Well, guys, that's going to be about it for this one. This is just one of many cars that I plan on doing some reviews on in my vintage collection. And like I said, this one's going in the box, getting shipped down under as soon as I finish up with this video. Anyway, if you like this kind of stuff, subscribe to the channel. I got more in store for you. And appreciate y'all hanging out with me for a little while. And stay healthy and have fun racing.